Welcome to Wealth Strategies Unleashed by Concenture Wealth Management. I'm Robert Gilliland.
And I'm Mike Alexander.
Here we are down in Houston doing these, and we have offices in Houston as well as Dallas doing these podcasts. Let's today talk about the upcoming retirement crisis and ways to avoid it. You know, we go through all the time, there's news reports all the time about how people with regard to their retirement savings aren't saving enough, they're taking too much risk. There are people who we're not in a good place. In fact, some recent statistics show that the average retirement savings, the amount of money that the average 55 to 64-year-old has saved away for retirement is $408,000. Now, that's probably not going to be enough for them to be able to retire. Basically, they're saving about 78% of what they're actually going to need in retirement.
I mean, that's an incredible statistic that you're sharing there. I think it just highlights the huge gap in savings that I think a lot of individuals have. And I think the second part of that is that there might be some maybe undue confidence that, you know, that some sort of government subsidy or Social Security or some sort of entitlement program is actually going to meet that gap. And I think for a lot of us, you know, when we see things like, you know, credit downgrades in the U.S. or we see the total amount of indebtedness that the United States has, you know, we start to kind of question whether or not it's actually going to be there for us and is it going to carry us all the way through retirement.
You know, we're solutions oriented. So what are some things that people can do? If you are that 55 to 64-year-old, let's talk about some of the things that they can do to help avoid that crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things clearly is to start planning early, right? Start planning early. And the things that you plan for are your liabilities, the debt, what you owe. And the things that you plan for is what your lifestyle is actually going to be like, mm-hmm. right? And so when you're going through and thinking about what should I be investing in is one great tool that I'm always amazed people take the bare minimum approach when going to look at their 401ks.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is that for a lot of investors, they spent their 30s and 40s, you know, raising kids, getting kids through college, and then they reach this point where, you know, they get close to being an empty nester, and they sometimes will forget that there are things like catch-up contributions that you can start making to retirement plans, things that can allow you to kind of close that gap and close the gap much quicker than if you're just making, you know, minimum contributions and not really setting aside enough to carry you through retirement.
And you know that I think that's a really good point. You can get, if you're going to max out your contributions, you can get $22,500 into your 401k. But if you're over the age of 50, you get that catch-up, an additional $7,500. You can actually save, before any sort of match or anything like that, $30,000. And if you're doing it, you will actually do it in a tax-advantaged way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the first thing that we always tell all of our clients is you want to pay yourself first, right? And the idea is certainly you always want to take advantage of any company match that you have, because essentially once you become vested in those programs, it's free money to you. It's a free rate of return on your investment. So you definitely want to do that when you're young, for sure. But as you get older and you get closer to retirement, you definitely want to make sure that you're maximizing those contributions as much as possible.
You know, the thing that I'm always amazed at is, and it was really funny, my son had a job while I was working in college last summer, and this company matched $2 for every dollar that he put in. It was the most incredible 401k savings plan that I ever saw, up to a certain percentage. I don't remember exactly what it was. He was only going to save to that dollar amount. The reality is that you have this ability to save so much more. And I'm always amazed at people who maybe are at a bit of a deficit or something like that they don't have a plan for how they can make that up with the 401k savings. And I told him, because mom and dad are still covering everything, he was just looking for some walk around money. I told him what he needed to do is get the absolute maximum. He needed to get that 15% inside of there. And then they were going to turn around and match it, right? So it was a huge deal. But for that person who is, let's call it over the age of 50, the thing to think about is that cash flow is important, right? You don't want to be cash flow, but what you can do is a lot of plans allow for you to automatically up it by 1% or 2%, like every 6 months or every quarter. And I really think that if you're saving less than the maximum, the approach that you want to take is to continue to increase that amount on a regular basis, whether it's every quarter, because that money's going into that 401k before tax. And if I'm in a 20% tax bracket and I put $1 in there, that full dollar gets invested. But if I take that dollar and then I'm going to go invest it myself, I'm only getting 80 cents to go to invest. So you got to take advantage. You got to take advantage of those benefits where they are. I also think things that people need to be thinking about, which are vitally important, and maybe we can do some podcasts on this in the future, is I think that far too many people view Social Security as I want to take it as early as possible, and that can come with some risk.
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing as it relates to Social Security is, people don't know how long they're going to live. So they don't know whether or not they should be taking it, at the earliest age possible, or whether or not they should wait and take it later. Obviously, if the longer that you can wait to take it, the higher the benefit is when you actually do begin to take it. And a lot of that is reliant on how much money do you have in other types of retirement plans. How much have you set aside that you can pull from when you need to start meeting needs, and it may allow you to maximize that benefit. And obviously, we all want to make sure we hope that it's there for us when we get there. But there's a big difference, obviously, between taking it at the earliest age possible and waiting till 70 years old.
Kind of changing the subject just a little bit. I think a big component that one of the things that's happened is, and this happened back in the 80s, is that people who were saving for retirement had a couple things. One, they had pensions. Two, they had Social Security. So I just would go to work for the company and I just would work all the way through, and I would have a pension and I'd have Social Security, and that would make up a big portion of my living expenses. But it's now come on to us. Basically, since the 80s, it's been the individual's responsibility to save for retirement. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to make sure that you have your budget in place. You have to make sure that you have your emergency fund in place. If you have a pension, you need to evaluate whether taking a lump sum or receiving those series of payments, the pension, make the most sense. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and one other thing I think that's really important is, you think about the average, and this really applies to younger people, but the average 30-year-old may have already had 5 jobs from the time that they graduate.
Right.
And so one of the things sometimes that those people will tend to do is they tend to forget. They kind of think to themselves, hey, I'm only going to be here for a year. There's no reason to even participate in the 401k. There's no reason to really save for retirement. I'll save for retirement later on when I get a job that I'm really going to stick with. Not thinking that, wait a minute, that's 5 years worth of compound interest and compounded returns that I actually had the opportunity to get. So, I think the way that we always like to think of it is every little bit counts, and the earlier you start, the better.
So I think that the earlier you start, better. Take full advantage of the match and have a disciplined approach to go to add. Evaluate your Social Security, right? Because take it too early or take it too late can have an impact inside there. And it is expensive if you make a mistake in Social Security.
For sure.
The other thing that I think that people need to be doing, and these are a lot of conversations that we have with clients, is the things that are top of mind is, do I have enough? What about insurance? What do I need to do if I have to take care of my parents? And so when you're going through, I really do think that there's going to be a portion of this retirement crisis that are all going to be about, well, it's because I wasn't able to save because I needed to help my parents, right? And so I think that there's some things that you can go through to do. You can evaluate different policies, different ways to kind of go through, whether it's a long-term care or some sort of hybrid policy. But specifically, the retirement crisis that you have to evaluate is, if you retire, what's healthcare going to cost you? right? And so your company will you may be eligible for a company sponsor, but there's Medicare, there's Medicare, B, D, all the different letters that go after Medicare, and making sure that you have the sufficient assets. One thing also along that healthcare side, we don't see as many people taking advantage of the health savings account.
Right. For sure.
Right. And so I do think that take advantage of that health savings account, because that can sit there and grow for you.
And it's also an investable account.
Right.
Can be an investable account where actually it can be invested for a time when you actually need it, or when healthcare costs are actually more than they are currently when you're healthy.
Right. So as you kind of go through this and are going through and looking at retirement crisis, is there anything else that kind of pops up that you see?
The only, there's a lot of things that obviously can, pop up. I would just say that from an investment perspective, it's just making sure that as you get closer and closer to retirement, that you're very mindful of the amount of risk that you're taking within your portfolio. And one of the reasons for that is because if you should encounter a down market, whether it's a financial crisis or a COVID, pandemic crisis, or whatever the case may be, and you see a sell-off in markets, the older you are, the less time you actually have to make up that loss. So you definitely want to make sure that that's something that you are always minding. And I think the last thing that I would make mention of is that all of these planning things, these things that you were talking about in terms of healthcare and insurance and estate and legacy planning and all of these things, it's one of the reasons why I think we happen to be in a very good position where we can work with not just individual clients, but we get to work with families.
Right.
And when you can work with a family, it really helps tie all of those things together, where, as a family, that everybody feels a lot more confident in terms of where they are. I think it's just remarkable how many family members really don't know, maybe they don't know what situation their parents are in, and it makes it even harder for them to plan, and vice versa. So it's really beneficial that we have the opportunity to do that.
I hearing you go through and say that, I think you're exactly right. This retirement crisis can absolutely be avoided. I really think for individuals, they can go through to avoid it. And going through and being disciplined, having a plan, knowing exactly where you're going is what you want to do. I would add to that I think that starting a little bit earlier and understanding the right way to create an income plan. Because people are pretty good about accumulating assets. When you have money, or can you have a disciplined approach, like with regard to a 401k, save money, right? If you have extra, put it into an IRA. Or a Roth IRA. If you have extra after that, put it into taxable savings. There's a lot of different things that you can go and do, invest it, all these different things. People are really good at accumulating assets. Creating an income stream off of those assets to make up that difference becomes a lot more difficult. And all of a sudden, when you're not working every day, and every day's a Saturday, it becomes a little bit easier to go to spend money. Go and buy a new golf court. Go buy new golf clubs. Go buy a new fishing pole. Take an extra long vacation. Making sure you have that budget, but understanding and planning how are you going to access that capital.
Right. Because
the 4% rule, the total number of assets that I have divided by 4%, that's how much I can live on, doesn't always work. There's a tremendous amount of fallacy and making sure that your income plan is adaptable.
Right.
It is growth oriented, and you ensure that those funds are available become vitally important so you have peace of mind. And in the process, the thing you talked about, volatility, market volatility, if you are in your working years, is actually in your benefit. Who doesn't like to buy things on sale? Right. Now, making sure your allocation's correct for the risk tolerances, obviously, inside there. But I definitely think that you need to evaluate your income plan. What are you going to really need, and how are you going to create that income stream as you're getting in there?
You said it.
And so with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to talking to you next week. Hopefully you got a little bit out of this, and have a great week. All right, so let's take care of some legal stuff. As a representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. and an investment advisory representative of Sanctuary Security Advisors, LLC Securities, offered through Sanctuary Securities, member FINRA, and SPIC. Advisory services offered through Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, an investment-registered investment advisor. Concenture Wealth Management is a DBA of Sanctuary Securities and Sanctuary Advisors, LLC.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as an offer or solicitation with respect to the purchase or sale of any security. The content is developed from sources believed to be accurate. No warranty, express or implied, is made regarding the accuracy, adequacy, completeness, legality, reliability, or usefulness of any information.
Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice or to predict future performance. The views expressed herein are not necessarily representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. or Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, and should not be interpreted as investment advice.
Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit against loss in periods of declining values. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Any investment discussed may not be suitable for all investors. Investors must take their own decisions based on their specific investment objectives and financial circumstances. Consult your financial professional before making any investment decision.
No part of this communication is intended to be construed as tax or legal advice. Please discuss your specific situation with a qualified tax or legal professional.